So before we talk about In Cold Blood, if you guys want to check out my feature film Pasty, you can. It's on Amazon right now, as well as the Blu-ray and other streaming services. Guys, if you want to support independent film, please check it out. It would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for the kind words about it. And seriously, check it out. I got the Blu-ray right here. So, yeah, there it is. You really can't get more cinematic than a glass of milk. That's lactose-free milk, by the way. This was a video I was not expecting to make because I'm working on a project right now, and I was talking to one of my actors, and he brought up that he wanted to channel Truman Capote in his performance. And I was familiar with who Truman Capote was. Obviously, I was no expert. And usually, whenever a collaborator brings something to me that they want to do or they're interested in, and we're working on the same project, I like to try to consume as much media as I can when it comes to that. And I was very intrigued because somebody else that I knew ended up bringing up In Cold Blood, not the book, but the movie. And I just was like, all right, I'm going to check out the film Capote, and I'm also going to check out In Cold Blood. So I ended up watching the film Capote just because, the actor that I'm working with wanted to, channel that. And Philip Seymour Hoffman does an amazing job in Capote. At first, it kind of threw me off a little bit, but then as you watch it, you really do kind of realize that he disappears into the role. Philip Seymour Hoffman was just fantastic. I mean, he was one of the best actors ever. Let's just move on. But the film that I want to talk about specifically is In Cold Blood, which at the time I would have to imagine was probably an extremely polarizing film. It stars Robert Blake as Perry Smith, and it also stars Scott Wilson as Dick Hickok, which, if you're not familiar with who Scott Wilson is, which a lot of people aren't, surprisingly, he is Herschel in The Walking Dead, so you get to see a young Herschel. And he was a phenomenal actor, too. Now, In Cold Blood, the thing that makes it very interesting, especially in the literary world, is it was the first ever nonfiction book of its style, basically. It changed the way that, that type of media or that type of format was indulged in. I mean, people really, when they read books, they kind of read books differently after In Cold Blood. And then when it came to writing, even in the film, they bring up that, writers were going to write differently after In Cold Blood. And that's the impact that it had on society because this was one of the first ever big true crime stories and everybody could read about it. I mean, the whole entire world could read about it. And it wasn't just a true crime film where it was other people committing other crimes against each other. It specifically was a family in a small town that fell victim to something horrendous, and that was at the time, I mean, unheard of. So the book In Cold Blood, controversy in itself. I mean, it was a great book, don't get me wrong, but I mean, people, it was subject matter people weren't used to. So to see a film like In Cold Blood come out extremely, extremely close to the actual novel itself, or the book itself, seeing a film come out near the book is just, it's kind of mind-blowing if you think about it. And I'm even looking at like the scores right now, and I mean they're still good, but there are a lot of mixed reviews in that. So I mean it's still a pretty I don't want to necessarily say controversial film, but it seems like people definitely have their opinions on it. Now the film is directed by Richard Brooks, and if you're not familiar with who Richard Brooks is, he did Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, but also Truman Capote, who wrote In Cold Blood, also did Breakfast at Tiffany's. Well, didn't make the film, but you get what I mean. He wrote the book. And the thing about In Cold Blood, the reason why I enjoy it so much as a film, for one, the cinematography is outstanding. I mean, the atmosphere, the cinematography alone sets up the atmosphere perfectly, and the performances are, Robert Blake and Scott Wilson, I mean, they channel off each other. It's a dynamic duo that even though you're not supposed to root for these people, you still want to watch what they do. And that's a very weird feeling to have when you watch a film like this, because the film itself is not presented in a way where, we get to see the way that it starts. You think that you're about to get to see the crime happen, but you don't. And it's kind of like, of course, based off the book, but also the film Capote sort of does the same thing, where kind of what happens, but then when you actually get the real story from Perry, I believe, then that's when things start to kind of click together. Now, with this film, you get to see the crimes happen later on in the film, but it's really just kind of a road movie where you get to watch these criminals on the run, or not on the run. They don't even think they're on the run. They're just, doing their own thing, trying to basically make the most out of life. And then on the other end, you have the authorities piecing this together. And it's really interesting how it all comes to be, because it's so anticlimactic the way that it just, without spoiling anything, which there's not really any spoilers. You can't really spoil this. I mean, it's a real case. I mean, there's all kinds of videos on it. I mean, there's some on YouTube that I listen to. So I mean, it's a pretty well known case. But uh, the way that everything pans out, it's a very anticlimactic film, and that's what I really like about it. But also, on top of the good cinematography, the editing is superb. I mean, some of the match cuts that they do in this, they're just very impactful. I mean, I know a lot of people talk about the match in Lawrence of Arabia, but for In Cold Blood, there are some pretty intense edits. Whoever edited this film, they knew what they were doing. I just cannot imagine that they were just editing this together and was like, oh yeah, well that looks cool. No, the editing in this film is very precise. It's the type of film where I mean, if you're an editor, I mean, you might even look up to this film for all I know. I mean, I edit, but I usually just edit my own stuff. But for people that are into that, I mean, golly, In Cold Blood is like one of the perfect films to watch and study, I think. And also, I want to talk just a bit about the brutality in this film, because if In Cold Blood was made today, and I'm not talking about like the 90s miniseries or what have you, which I have not seen, but I've heard things about, but I'm talking about today specifically. I think the thing that makes it so unnerving is I do think that this is the quintessential version that you should watch, because even though it is tame in terms of its subject matter and how it shows things, it's still very ruthless with it. And I think it's what you don't see that really, I think, impacts the most, because the fact of the matter is this isn't like any other movie where something horrible happens to them and then you're able, you just don't get to see anything. Something horrible happens to them and you either get to see it or you don't. Well, in any other film that's not based off something true, when that happens, oh, well, I didn't get to see it, so I get to imagine a bunch of things, or I did get to see it, and that's just kind of how it is. But with this film, it takes the brutality of it and it kind of puts it behind a curtain where you don't get to see it. But the thing is, you can go online and you can look at crime scene photos. So it's one of those few films where, yeah, if you want to see the brutality of it, you can. I mean, you can. I mean, you can even watch the film Capote and you can see it. So it's interesting like that. And I think In Cold Blood is one of those few films where it's timeless. I mean, I was watching it, and while I was watching it, I was just seeing all the 60s cars in the background, and all the wardrobes and such, and basically it felt like a modern day film. It took me sometimes to realize, like, there was a moment when I was watching the film where I was like, hey, this is set in the past, and this is, it's just a timeless story. Even the subject matter is timeless. It's always going to be timeless because stuff like this is always going to happen. So, but yeah, if you haven't seen In Cold Blood, I would highly recommend checking it out. I am one of those few people that are late to the party. Well, I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of people that actually haven't seen it. But also Capote is a good film as well. So I just wanted to talk about In Cold Blood. Thought it would be a good film to talk about, both of those films. But anyway, guys, take it easy. See you next time. And check out Pesadilla. It would mean a lot. Oh, and check out my link tree too.